3 reasons millennials should ditch Karl Marx for Ayn Rand. Now everyone knows who Daddy Marx is. If you don't know who Ayn Rand is the author of such seminal literature as, I believe she wrote The Fountainhead. Atlas Shrugged is her main book everyone knows her for. Which the plot of Atlas Shrugged is basically society collapses if all the billionaires and business owners disappear. I don't think I need to mention how dumb that is. Dear avocado toast eating brethren, we need to drop Karl Marx like we dropped cable TV. I disagree. Convince me. We're a generation that's sick of wars and threats of wars, mass shootings, and media sensationalism. Okay, yeah, I agree. We're all sick of wars, threatening wars, and media sensationalism. Mass shootings, of course. As the ambassadors of the sharing economy and investors in cryptocurrency, we hold innovation and entrepreneurship in high esteem. Innovation, yes. I think a lot of millennials are seeing the issues with glorifying entrepreneurship, but, I want to state that entrepreneurship is not inherently bad, but it does promote a certain attitude that is not good. Karl Marx is not who we think he is. His philosophy doesn't align with our values at all. We need to look to somebody more in touch with what's important to us, someone like Ayn Rand. So right off the bat, I know this is going to be about libertarianism, anarcho-capitalism, this idea that we should all live in a totally unregulated free market, and that should be how society is structured. And I know from history that that's a bad idea, because when we had a nearly unregulated market, it led to company towns and the Great Depression. So, also, Ayn Rand died living on the government dole. So, someone who preached self-sufficiency and don't rely on the government literally spent the tail end of her life living off the government. So, maybe don't believe everything she says. And keep in mind that unlike Marx, who you could argue didn't live in a communist utopia, that was because such a place didn't exist in his lifetime, whereas Ayn Rand did live in a capitalist society and chose to live on the government dole instead of either dying or finding another way to feed herself. Karl Marx advocates using violence to get you what you want? Yes, because the only way to achieve... Keep in mind that violence isn't just hitting someone with a stick, or whatever metaphorical phrase you want to use. Violence can also be fiery rhetoric, or using propaganda or speech. Things that most people don't really consider violence. We hate the constant stream of wars the U.S. gets involved in, whether it's Iraq or Afghanistan, or the threat of the Islamic State or North Korea. We're just tired of it all. Why can't everyone get along? Why do we have to topple regime after regime and flex our muscles on Twitter? Don't even get us started on the mass shootings. It's 2017, for crying out loud. This violence needs to stop. Okay, I didn't actually realize this article was from 2017. It still seems relevant. Again, violence does not just mean wars. The civil rights was full of violence, and no one would call that a bad thing. Well, some people would. They would be wrong. If only Karl Marx felt the same way. But unfortunately, he says that the only way to bring about the ideal political state is through violent revolution. Right, because the wealthy people are not going to quietly let us expropriate their wealth. They didn't get it quietly, so why should we take it from them quietly? In depicting the most general phases of the development of the proletariat, we trace the more or less veiled civil war raging within existing society, up to the point where that war breaks out into open revolution and where the violent overthrow of the bourgeoisie lays the foundation for the sway of the proletariat. Oh, brother, please, no more wars. You don't understand, comrade. This is the final war. Ayn Rand, on the other hand, is not a proponent of violence. She says violence should only be a means of self-defense. If someone invades your country, you can retaliate. If someone punches you in the face, you can retaliate. If someone tries to steal your stuff, you can retaliate. But there's no reason you should employ violence other than if you or your stuff are attacked. Not all violence is the same. Also, this is ignoring the inherent violence of a capitalist system, which is what Ayn Rand would propose. A civilized society is one in which physical force is banned from human relationships, in which the government, acting as a policeman, may use force only in retaliation and only against those who initiate its use. So she wants to continue the monopoly on violence the government enjoys. Karl Marx appeals to your emotional indignation. I groan every time a boomer rants about entitled millennials these days. We're not entitled. We're not lazy. When they try to guilt us into going to church more or playing video games less or buying a house or getting married while we're still young, please, emotional appeals are the worst. Good thing that Marx also has data and philosophical rigor to his arguments rather than Ayn Rand's just blathering about the greatness of great men and the, uselessness of the rest of us. And don't even get us started on media sensationalism. We've had enough of the red shouting faces, the blatant lying of fear and fear-mongering, the wars on Christmas. The media is constantly trying to pit us against each other. Well, yes. The origin behind the Atlas Shrugged name is the idea that a group of powerful people just shrug and it destroys the world. And the thing that the powerful and the elite are terrified of is that you will realize that you are Atlas. You and every other regular working stiff out there are Atlas. And you need but shrug, and we can destroy the world as it is and recreate it anew. How do they keep us from realizing that? Well, by using media to pit black against white, black against brown, this nation against that nation, this religion against that religion. I have more in common with a random person in Iran than I do with someone like Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or anyone else who you might think, from a visual perspective, I might have more in common with. It turns out that Karl Marx uses the same us versus them hysteria as CNN and Fox News. He appeals to pathos and emotional outrage to, like we discussed above, try to get us to start a war. Because this is the only way to achieve the ends, to achieve equality. At least this was the only way he could find in the 19th century. We might be able to peacefully create a socialist state, a true, proper socialist state, but I don't think so. Freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guildmaster and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight, a fight that each time ended either in revolutionary reconstitution of society at large or in the common ruin of the contending classes. Here's an interesting thing I think this article is trying to do. It's looking at the individual positions of the two thinkers, the two writers, as the most important thing and not looking at what they're trying to achieve. Because a lot of people I know are Marxists or leftists or socialists because they believe it will create a better world, and there's evidence to support that. But there's less evidence for the kind of world that Ayn Rand wanted to create. In fact, there's evidence opposing it. Certainly more evidence than the actual evidence opposing socialism. So while I agree that in an ideal world, Rand's idea of violence only in self-defense would be preferred, I prefer Marx's end goals. And as a consequentialist, that's the most important thing. We're not having any of that, though, are we? We're done being manipulated by outrage and hysteria. It's time to change the channel to something a little calmer, more grounded, and personally empowering. Ayn Rand, fortunately, has the peaceful empowerment we're so desperately missing. While Karl Marx wants you to blame others, the bourgeoisie, for your plight, Ayn Rand wants you to introspect and perhaps reassess your values. Rather than encouraging you to camouflage yourself into a union of workers, she wants to empower you as an individual to create a meaningful life for yourself. Mass hysteria, be gone. So this is another important thing. Randian great man theory, libertarian, ANCAP worldview is built around the idea that the individual is the most important, and so if you don't succeed, it's your fault. Society has shown consistently that the individual acting individually is the weakest unit in society. But when individuals get together, the infamous strains of Solidarity Forever,
For the union makes us strong. When the union union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run. There can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But
society, history has shown that an individual acting alone can achieve change, but it's so much harder than when you work together. When you band together with people who have a common cause, you are much more effective and can achieve much greater ends. So even though, yes, I think that we should create a society that allows someone to express themselves and be their own individual, when we're talking about building a better society and creating a better world, we need to look not to the individual, but to the group, to the union. Do not let your fire go out, sparked by irreplaceable spark, in the hopeless swamps of the not quite, the not yet, and the not at all. I agree with this. This is something that I think happened to leftism for 40 or 50 years. We'd lost popular consciousness. We were being maligned and slammed in college and media, so we went to sleep. And then a fascist was elected president, and an admitted democratic socialist got closest to the presidency than anyone has gotten in the history of the United States. So, do not let your fire go out. Let it rage on into the night. Do not let the hero in your soul perish in lonely frustration for the life you deserved and have never been able to reach. The world you desire can be won. It exists, it is real, it is possible, it is yours. So this is something I think a lot of people misunderstand about Marxian theory, about socialism. It's not that we believe that the individual is worthless, it's the individual trying to change society is weak, and that we should work together to build that better society. Something like Ayn Rand, they believe that the individual is all important, that life is a zero-sum game, and if you help someone out, that hurts you. And if someone else succeeds, that means you fail. Karl Marx wants mankind to rest on its laurels. Well, we've got pretty good iPhones, SpaceX can salvage and relaunch rockets, and thanks to service like HelloFresh and Blue Apron, we no longer have to go to the grocery store. Time to pack it up, call it a day, everyone go home, there's no more need for innovation. What the fuck? If Marx had his way, all incentives to improve and create cooler things would be stripped out of our lives along with our private property. No! Following the logical progression of his communal philosophy, when we're all slaving away for the greater good, and the highest achieving members of society are having the fruits of their labors redistributed to the lowest achievers, no. The problem is right now, we don't labor for society and the greater good. We labor to enrich wealthy owners and people who may not have worked a day in their life. There's no reason to assume innovation would cease to occur under Marxism. Innovation comes from the desire to make something more efficient or easier, not because someone can make money off of it. The claim that men should be retained in jobs that have become unnecessary, doing work that is wasteful or superfluous, to spare them the difficulties of retraining for new jobs, thus contributing, as in the case of railroads, to the virtual destruction of an entire industry, this is the doctrine of the divine right of stagnation. Yeah, I agree. I agree with this right here, that we should not prop up an industry just because it employs thousands of people. Hello, fracking. We'll always, You know there's a difference between private property and personal property, right? In Marxian theory, private property are things you own that you can make a profit from, i.e. a factory, or a call center, or a backhoe. Personal property are things you own that you don't make a profit from, like your clothes, like your toothbrush, like a car. So your stuff will always remain yours under socialism, as long as what's yours isn't a factory you're using to exploit workers. We don't have to share our Nintendo Switch with our little sister who drops her phone 10 times a day. Under socialism, you wouldn't have to either. But what if I drive Uber? Is that public now? So something like Uber is kind of an example. That is an interesting question, and I would say that it depends on the structure. Something like Uber really couldn't exist in a proper socialist economy. However, you can use I guess I was a little overly reductionist when I said a private property is something you use to make a profit. Because in that case, no, your car would not become, if you were providing rides to people and they were paying for you in socialist society, your car does not become public property any more than it does in our society when you allow someone else into it. You would still own it, you would still be responsible for it. But when we refer to private property like that, we refer to things like factories, like machines that are used in producing consumer goods or industry goods, what have you. See, Uber is a weird thing because it can only exist in a hyper-capitalist society like we have in the form that it does, where there's an organization that takes most of the money but shunts all of the risk and upkeep onto the worker. We can rest easy knowing that if we take a big risk and invest in cryptocurrencies while parents mutter Ponzi scheme under their breath, didn't Dogecoin just hit $0 here recently? We have the opportunity for a big reward. And best of all, with Rand's philosophy reaffirming our desire to be great and create great things, maybe someday we will have Jarvis, jetpacks, and flying hammocks. Ugh. This is someone who understands nothing about actual Marxian philosophy. There's no reason to assume there would be no innovation under socialism. Just because you can't become a millionaire under socialism doesn't mean there wouldn't be incentives for innovation. Social credit goes a long way, especially if it's important to society. Not saying social credit like the Chinese do, but just, that knowledge that you created something to help the world, or at least your little corner of it. The fact of the matter is that Karl Marx doesn't align with what's important to us millennials. If we're up to him, we'd be starting more violent wars. No, we would start one violent war and then it'd be over. We'd be widening the gap of distrust between one another. Quite the opposite. Solidarity. And we'd strip ourselves of all incentives to make the world cooler than it already is. Wrong. So it's time we adopt a new philosopher. Let's look up to people like Ayn Rand. Let's not say we did. Ayn Rand is an idiot who, like I said, died completely violating everything she proposed in her books. Marx, from everything I have read, sincerely believed in the socialist cause and worked towards creating it, even if he did dislike anarchists. So yeah, fuck Ayn Rand, Marx is based. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you liked it, like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you. See you next time.